Hello, and thank you so much for joining me on Cracked Open with Coach Kristin. It is always my favorite episode when I get to have my dear friend Sam Racster with me. Sam, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I love having you.
That's what she said.
All right, let's back it up. So, Sam and I met in Smart Recovery. I've been teaching Smart Recovery every Tuesday night for, well, we're going on 4 years now. And I met Sam. Sam was one of my students and then became one of my clients and is evolved into one of my dearest friends and fellow thinker, leader, seeker on this journey with me. What we wanted to talk about today is really important to both of us because we've experienced all different forms of recovery, and from traditional recovery to smart recovery. And then what Sam's going to share with us today is AVRT. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Sam, and let you tell us what that stands for and what it means to you.
So pretty much AVRT, it stands for Addictive Voice Recognition Technique. And it is just a series of things to know about the way your mind works and the way addiction works. And the thing about AVRT is it's not a system, it's not a program, it's not a treatment. It is just knowledge of how it is. The facts of the matter, basically. Every person who's ever recovered from an addiction ever has used AVRT in some form. Because AVRT is basically a decision that you stick to. And every person who's ever just recovered decided to recover and stuck to that decision. And anything that went against that was not allowed in. And that's basically what AVRT is in a very quick nutshell. So I'll hand it back over to you, and we can delve a little bit deeper into a couple of the really key things to get about AVRT and how it makes things just so much easier.
So much easier because it's cut and dry. We're not talking about morals. We're not talking about whether or not you are powerless or you have power over yourself. We are not talking about how shameful your past was and all of the components that I experienced in early recovery revolved almost solely around those three things. And what you and I both know, having backgrounds in psychology and coaching, is that what you focus on, you create more of.
Yes, in the woo woo sphere, that is definitely true. But I want to push back on one thing you said, that it's not about morals, because one of the key components of AVRT, as Jack Trimpey designed it, and I worked directly with Jack. I went through the full one-on-one with Jack for a period of months and learned all there is to know about it, basically, because there's not that much to know. It's easy to say I know all there is to know, because there's just not that much. But the moral axis is one of the things that AVRT brings back into this, and I'll explain that. A lot of systems of recovery, and I'm not talking about any one in particular, take the moral axis out and say it's not your fault. You have a disease. You were afflicted by something, and AVRT puts the moral axis back in. You can look at your past through that lens, but it's best not to. It doesn't do you any good to go back and look and say, well yeah, all the ways in which I screwed up, and now I need to just wallow in that guilt. It's not useful. Live in the future is the only period of time that you can have any influence on. You can't control the past. The past is the past. But the moral axis says, and I'm going to talk about drinking because that's what I know, but you substitute any substance or behavior for drinking, you know, whatever's got you hung up and fucked up, then that's what it is. But engaging in an activity that eliminates my moral judgment is immoral in and of itself, because it's the linchpin. It's the thing that sets off the version of me that is a completely immoral person. Like, I'm a decent guy, you know. Some would say a darn good one when I'm sober. You know, like, I can guarantee you that at no point today am I at risk of committing a felony. Just not. I can promise you I will lay my head in the bed tonight without having even come close to committing a felony. Now, I go across the street to the liquor store. I cannot make that promise.
That's right.
You know, I don't know what I might do. I don't know. I'm not going to kick a puppy today, but get me a fifth of whiskey. No puppy safe. Mm-hmm. So, you know, there is a moral axis to it. And, you know, like, this maudlin guilt isn't useful, but to look back and say, I am ashamed of many of the things I did in my past, is not it's a useful statement, because I don't wish to go back and repeat shameful, immoral behavior. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that morality is defined by something external to you. I think we all agree on some really basic stuff, like don't steal, don't kill, don't rape. But, you know, it's not beyond that as to what constitute moral, like, you know, what your religious or sexual preferences are. None of that factors into it. Like, you have your own version of what's right and what's wrong, and bring that back into it is one of the components of AVRT, to say the most wrong thing I can do is to consume alcohol, and it's because that opens me up to being a monster. Mm-hmm. Whereas none of the things that I could do am I even at risk of thinking about doing. Mm-hmm. I'm not gonna hurt anybody. I'm not gonna do anything that I would find repugnant, because I don't do things that are repugnant. I don't have any desire to do them. You know, and, you know, like, even in some cases where, you know, I may be attracted to a person, I'm not going to do anything that offends them or makes them feel uncomfortable.
It's not in your makeup, because that's not who you are. And then if we add something like alcohol that changes who you are, changes the way your brain functions, that is when now we become open to ruining our lives.
Yeah. I mean, you know, that's just, so, you know, that's enough on the moral axis. So I want to define what the addictive voice is, and also where it comes from.
Yes.
So it's easy to spot the addictive voice on like the first pass, because the addictive voice is defined as any thought, belief, or image that supports the idea of the future use of whatever your substance or behavior is. Any thought that opens the idea that that's a possibility is the addictive voice, and it comes in 1,000 different ways. And so, you know, if you're watching this right now and you're saying, it's not that simple, dude, that is the addictive voice talking right there. It is that simple. It absolutely is that simple. You have to do the thing that you don't want to do. You have complete sovereignty over the use of your hands. Mm-hmm. Not one time that I, you know, quote unquote, relapsed in my life was I not completely sober and drove myself to the liquor store. Yeah. I made a decision. This is what I'm doing, and I executed that decision flawlessly.
There's a term you've used many times in our sessions instead of relapse. Can you share that? Because I think there's a lot of power in that.
Yeah, I've changed my mind in the past.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that the Addictive Voice loves to say is, you've changed your mind so many times. How do you know you're not going to change it again?
That's right.
Well, just recognizing that as that's an addictive voice thought. That opens the idea that somehow or another I might change my mind in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And given that I am permanently recovered, not recovering, recovered from my addiction to alcohol, recovered. No, I'm not. I'm not open to any thought, belief, or image that allows for the future use, regardless of how subtle or from a weird angle it comes. And the fear of future situations that would cause me to lose control is addictive voice. So it's always looking to undermine the decision that I've made in whatever way it can, and because it has one goal and one goal only, and that's to get that substance into my body. That's its only goal. Now, where it comes from is the limbic system. So Jack Trimpey hypothesized that addiction is the survival drives and pleasure, the seeking of pleasure. So, the things that really give us pleasure are primarily food and sex. And, the really big, oh my God, pleasures, like, chocolate cake. Ugh. You've heard somebody eat something that's delicious. You see the primal limbic system kind of like, oh God, like, it's like, are you eating cake or are you having an orgasm, dude? Like, clearly something's happening inside of you that you should probably get a room for. And, like, that's coming from that system, because that system, like, if you're hungry, the hungrier you get, the better food tastes.
Mm-hmm.
If you're deprived of air, a nice deep breath feels as good as anything you've ever experienced. If you're thirsty as hell, you want a glass of ice water. Like, that system is designed to regulate your achievement of certain survival instincts. Mm-hmm. And the desire for pleasure is one of the ways in which our brains are designed to like make us seek the things that it needs. Now, drugs and alcohol especially, but also a number of other behaviors that create big dopamine spikes, hijack that part of the brain, and it starts to believe that anything that causes this level of dopaminergic pleasure has to be key to survival. As important as water, as important as food, as important as sex, as important as air. And it just gets wired to think that. And so it's constantly sending out the signal, need this, need this. And it has the ability to, since it's part of your brain, it has the ability to mimic itself as being your own thoughts. So one of the first things to know is that those survival drives, and everybody who's ever tried to lose a single pound knows that the moment you decide to lose a single pound, this thing in your brain starts saying cake, Doritos, ice cream, and you either succeed or you fail. You either change your mind and say, you know what, the pleasure I'm going to get from this chocolate sundae is more important than the weight I was going to lose. And people go in that yo-yo situation for, an entire lifetime in many cases. Mm-hmm. So it's a symptom of health to have those, have you ever seen I've put a number of animals down in my, my sad animal having life. The shitty part about pets is they don't live that long compared to human lives. And my decision for every animal I've ever decided to euthanize has been when I put their favorite treat in front of them and they didn't eat it.
Me too. Yes. Yep.
And so as soon as they've lost the desire for pleasure, then I'm like, they're gone. There's nothing left. This, like my last dog that I had to put down a year ago, I just loved to make her eat chips because she was so loud, and it was like I've never been as happy as her eating Doritos. Never, not once. Not even that one time on that island, like, no, not once have I ever been as happy as my dog eating Doritos. So when a human or a dog or, basically any mammal has no desire for pleasure, then that's a sign of unhealth. And the healthier you are, the more horny you're going to be, the more, you're going to want all kinds of stuff because your healthy body and brain is saying, hey, let's party. But when it's hijacked with what is meant by let's party is let's consume something that has caused huge problems, then let's party's a real problem. Yeah. So, that's where it comes from. It's the base brain, the hind brain versus the front brain being the human brain. And to distinguish between I and it, it's called the I-it split. And it's learning to take back the pronoun I. So I means human, sovereign, Sam. That's what I means. And it throws all kinds of dumb ideas at me. It throws, if I see a woman at the mall, it wants to do things that woman would not appreciate. And it sees beer at the convenience store. It wants to buy that beer and go drink all of it, or whatever else it wants, and really, like, food and sex and alcohol are the areas where, like, it really just screams. But you don't have a hard time as a sober person, as a person who's in complete control of their front brain. You don't argue against those desires. There's just things that you do and things that you don't do. And we have a code of conduct that we live by. And I'm not saying that there's one code of conduct. I have a code of conduct that I live by. There's certain amounts of respect that I wish to show people around me. There's certain things that I want to have done, and lots of things that I don't do. Mm-hmm. And I don't argue against the things that I don't do, except in the case of the early phase of abstaining from alcohol. There's just this constant, like, oh, blah, you're tired, you deserve a drink. Like, just every possible thing in the world. But did you notice what I said there? You deserve a drink. Mm-hmm. There's two voices in your head, and I'm not talking about mental illness. I'm talking about, it sounds like a voice. And anybody who's ever been addicted knows that if you pay attention to it, it's not your voice. That's right. It is not your primary train of thought. It is something coming, and it's literally coming from the base of the brain, throwing out vague sensations that get translated into words. And the moment you surrender the pronoun I to it, then it says, I want to drink. And once, you're halfway home by the time you've surrendered the pronoun. Because then you start saying, well, I could drink tonight, and I could get, I'd have time to do all I wanted, and I could be back tomorrow, and blah, blah, blah. And that just sets a whole string of shit in motion that I've chosen to not ever have happen again. Yeah. So the I-it split is a big, big part of it. To know that desire is healthy, it goes away in terms of being like urges pretty quickly. Especially once the decision is set in stone. Like, this is just a thing I'm not going to do anymore.
Yeah, as one of the clients says, she says, no, thank you, that's not for me. She doesn't go into, oh, I can't handle alcohol, I have a disease, it makes me sick, blah, blah, blah. She just says, oh, that's not for me. And the simplicity of that, like, yeah, is phenomenal. There's so much freedom in just saying and reminding your brain, that's not for me.
Well, and I've been involved in a number of different recovery modalities in my life, and in every single one of them, including those that would say this isn't true, the advice that I've heard dispensed numerous times is, none of this is going to work until you're done.
Yeah.
None of it. Until you put the plug in the jug and decide that you're done with this bullshit, none of this is going to do any good, which is true, which is why I say every person who's ever recovered did AVRT in some way, because they made a decision, I'm done, and anything that disagrees with that is not part of what's allowed into my space. Right. So, you know, that's that. Let's see. Shifting is another one of the key components of AVRT, which is inevitably somebody's going to throw a drink in your face. You know, if you're addicted to a hard drug, you might be able to avoid being around that hard drug forever. But if you're, you know, if your addiction is something that is kind of a part of normal life, food, sex, alcohol, kind of those addictions, you're going to be faced with your addiction all the time. Mm-hmm. I mean, I went and got a submarine sandwich, and I had to walk through the beer aisle to get back to get my sandwich. You know, like I wasn't twitching when I walked through the beer aisle. I was just, you know, but it's there. It's always going to be there. And shifting is inevitably you're going to be in the presence of, or not even in the presence, but just in the consideration of, and being able to shift between what your beast sees, which is what Jack Trimpey called that limbic system, because it described the animalistic nature of an addict in active addiction. And I know that sounds harsh, but I can tell you from being one, you know, like my room becomes a nest. It becomes a lair, like a wolf lives there. Like, you know, like everything about me starts to become an animal.
That is exactly how I felt at the end. Like buried under a pile like a wolf in a den, ready to bite the hand of anyone that dares come near me, especially if they're taking away my drugs or alcohol. Like it
right.
I've been using the word feral a lot lately in a good way, but I was feral in a damaged, broken, dangerous way versus today being feral in a give no F's. Apparently I do give an F because I said the word F instead of the real word.
Well, you just don't want to get the video banned, although I'm probably going to say it enough times to get it banned.
It's okay. I'm already going to put an expletive warning on it.
Just put it on there, because
just my mom's not used to hearing me say the F word. So out of respect for Char, I say the word F if I think she might watch it.
Well,
sorry,
I'll do my best. So yeah, like it's called the beast for that reason, and I forgot where I was before I went on that tangent.
I apologize.
But anyway, no, it's okay. Like so those are, you know, that's it in a nutshell. But I kind of the last thing that I wanted to reiterate was the addictive voice is any thought that supports the idea of the future resumption of your addiction is the addictive voice, including anyone telling you that if you're not practicing the right religious practices, or if you're not practicing the right psychological practices, or anything else, that somehow or another you will lose your sovereignty to make your decision. That is addictive voice in and of itself. Yeah. So any modality will work if you've made the decision. You know, so, you know, if the modality you want has meetings, go to them, knock yourself out. If it doesn't have meetings, don't go to the meetings that aren't there. Or, you know, like if you've made the decision and you understand that the addictive voice is anything that disagrees with that decision, basically, then any modality will work. And if you've not made that decision and you leave it constantly up for grabs and give up the idea that you are in control of your own behavior, then no modality will work.
With that being said, will you take a moment to touch on when that voice tells you, hey, Sam, you've been sober for a few years now. You got this. Like, you can totally have a glass of champagne at your daughter's wedding. You'll be fine.
Well, I mean, I've done that twice in my life. But 5 and 7 years respectively. Well, I'm just, yeah. And what the Addictive Voice told me at the time, because it's always there, it's just not really messing with you too often, but every once in a while, it's looking for its angle. And the angle that it took was, life was way different 7 years ago.
Yeah.
You were really angry about a lot of things, and you're just not the same person anymore. You're a much happier person. No duh. Like, you spent 7 years sober, you're a lot happier because you don't have 10 bullshit problems going on. They're mostly of your own making. So of course you're happier. But it said you could handle this. Like, you could just, and I tried, didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Worked for a little while. But eventually, see, it's not that I have some congenital defect. It's that I really love pleasure, Kristin.
Mm-hmm.
There's, show me something that feels good, and I'm going to show you something I want to do.
Yep.
And I know of nothing that feels better than the right amount of alcohol and weed in my case. Mm-hmm. I can't think of anything that feels better than that. I'd tell you sex feels better than that, but I would, based on results, I gave up opportunities for sex many times to just be alone and drunk. Mm-hmm. So based on behavior, there's nothing that feels better to me than that. So, there's no congenital defect that causes me that causes me to be this kind of person that can't control it. Like, I don't even know what controlling it even means. Like, I don't want to control it. I want to experience it at its fullest potential, and moderation is not congruent with getting to the level of drunk to experience the deep, deep, deep pleasure that getting to that state of having completely forgotten my front brain and anything the front brain may be thinking about, and just be like, oh God, this is great. Like the chocolate cake thing. It's like Jack Trimpey called that the ozone. Oh, this is good. Yeah. Of course I want that. But there's only, a limited amount of healthy ways to experience that. And they're not as intense as getting the dose right on addictive behaviors.
And I speak from experience when I say that even though I've been sober from drugs and alcohol for going on 4.5 years now, that doesn't mean that I haven't fallen into traps where I'm bypassing the work I need to be doing with pleasure or distraction of some sort. Like, it is human nature, especially when we're flipped out and terrified and our window of tolerance, we're like hanging out in the threshold all the time. If we don't find a way to bring balance to our lives, to our nervous system, then you're constantly going to be looking for pleasure, distraction, avoidance. Like, these are the way our brain was built. And if you feed into that all the time, then you don't hone and develop the skills that make you balanced and well-rounded and available to receive full pleasure, the full spectrum of your good and bad emotions. Like, there's no spot numbing. It doesn't work that way.
I would agree with you from a personal development standpoint, wholeheartedly. You can't substitute one addiction for another, or you're just going to wind up with problems from the substitute. And people even people are like, well, exercise addiction is as bad as alcoholism. No, it's not.
It's not going to land you in jail.
Now some people with severe body dysmorphia and they get into forms of bulimia. Obviously those problems can go to extremes that are equally life wrecking. Yeah. But for the most part, exercise addiction, or I've heard this thing called orthophilia is a term that somebody invented, which is focusing too much on healthy food. I'm like, what kind of douchebag would even invent that word? That had to be a German person. It had to be German. That you like healthy food too much. Like stupid. It's like, it's, and I know people who are obsessed with eating right, but the way I think about it is there's really only one set of pleasures that I've determined. Well, there's more than one, but like there's this specific pleasure that is just not available to me ever. And there's other things like, my management of food and sex, in particular is, I have some guidelines, I have some goals, I have some like ideals, but I haven't been like, I will never eat chocolate cake again. Chocolate cake is off limits under any and all circumstances. I've not made that decision. I said, well, I'm going to do as good as I can manage because that's my level of commitment based on how much damage it's done to my life. If I found out I was diabetic tomorrow, then I would put chocolate cake in a category that's equally as bad as alcohol. But I'm not diabetic. I don't even feel I don't even feel like I need to say yet. Like I eat okay, but every now and then pizza looks delicious, and I lose the argument with the base part of my brain that says eat pizza, and I'm like, I don't want to eat pizza. I'm trying to lose weight, and he's like, I don't care, eat that pizza, and I'm like, okay, I'll eat the pizza. But well, yes, bypassing from a personal development and a spiritual growth standpoint, and substituting and escapist behaviors are a problem, but they're in a different category than an addictive behavior that has ruined your life. And many of them could, like food, sex addiction, even exercise addiction, body dysmorphia, like any of those things could blossom into something that becomes a real problem, like hospitalization type problem. But most of the time they don't. So, there's a fine balance to be struck between asceticism, and facing everything just head on with no escape whatsoever, and just like, and total avoidance. And it's like, well, I can be the guy covered in Cheeto dust on all parts of my body because I've just given into all forms of pleasure that aren't the thing I was addicted to. And all of a sudden I'm not living anything that looks like my best life. But I've never been arrested for Cheeto dust. So, that's so much a part of any individual's journey. And the reason that I harp on it a little bit is I wouldn't want anyone to get confused about the order of operations, like in math, between self-improvement and abstinence. Abstinence opens you up to whatever level or non-level of self-improvement you want to have. And if you want to be a fat pervert and you have sworn off alcohol, you can be a fat pervert for the rest of your life who is stone sober and engaged in fat perversion all you want. But most people have found, most people would find that that's not true. They're just not. Abstinence opens the door for you to decide what your life is going to look like. Not the other way around. Self-improvement does not lead to some magical event where you're struck abstinent without having decided that that's the way it's going to be. And
I would even go as far as to say, I'll speak for myself in this case, and I'll speak for the people, the clients and students that I serve. The self-improvement can't work, doesn't work, will not work if there is alcohol or drugs or both running in the background. If you,
correct.
especially alcohol and drugs, I mean, some self-improvement can come if you are struggling with food addiction. Some self-improvement can come if you are struggling with gambling addiction. I've seen it. When a substance, alcohol or a form of drugs, is changing Not that behaviors don't, because they do, just in a different way. When a substance is changing the homeostasis of your brain and body, and your chemicals are completely unbalanced and out of whack, no amount of meditating is going to save your ass. No amount of yoga is going to help you rewire your neural pathways. You can meditate and do yoga like a monk. If you're consuming drugs and alcohol, it's not going to work. And I know because I started therapy in 2016.
Well, and the thing,
Very committed to therapy, journaling, all the things. And nothing moved the needle until I removed alcohol from my life.
and I would add to that that modern neuroscience has identified that it takes so little alcohol in particular to change your sleep patterns and to change your neurotransmitter balance. It's like almost, it's not an amount to me that would even be worth drinking. Like to drink under that amount would be a waste of time. It would just piss me off.
Yeah.
I don't want one beer.
Or the amount of alcohol that changes the efficacy of your mental health medication. So if you're on an SSRI or an antipsychotic like Abilify or Wellbutrin, one serving, so a 5-ounce glass of wine, which I don't even know how to pour 5 ounces because mine were always 8 to 12 ounces. Even
Yeah.
the bartender, poor bar owners I worked for, I've never in my life poured a 5-ounce glass of wine, but that's all it takes for all of your efficacy of your medication to be wiped out. For every serving,
Makes sense.
depleted by half. So if you're having 2 glasses of wine a night, your medication is flat out not working, let alone the extra damage that's going on to your neurotransmitters and brain tissue and all the other things. But we don't talk about, nobody talks about that. Anytime I give that statistic, people are like, really? What? Why don't doctors tell us that? And it's like, well, it does say on the bottle, but in America, we're like, who cares what it says on the bottle?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. I didn't know that statistic, but it makes perfect sense because it's right in alignment with what I do understand about how little it takes to change your brain chemistry in such a way that you're not having the same level of clarity, or the same level of mood regulation, and anxiety is increased. Like it just takes so little as to be like, to drink under that amount, pointless for me anyway. Like maybe somebody loves the taste of a 4-ounce pour of wine, but I just don't see the point in it myself. Like, but we live in a society that celebrates it, so people are going to do what they're going to do. But I had one more point. Like I think I've given as much of an overview of AVRT. There's a book called Rational Recovery by Jack Trimpey if you really want to delve deep into it. And since Jack passed away and they kind of shuttered the whole doors of Rational Recovery because it really was more or less just him. But his old second in command when he was in business and alive was a lady named Deborah Springborn. And she posted, with the family's permission, the entire AVRT, the course live that's available. Just type AVRT live
and I'll
in
put
YouTube, and it's available for free on YouTube. You can watch that. You can read the book. There's not a whole lot more to it than I just said. And obviously, I've given a skeleton, and there's meat to be put on the bones. And I highly recommend arming yourself with as much of the knowledge about that as possible, because my experience with it is the times when I was sober for a long time, I was doing that without knowing it. Mm-hmm. I had made a decision. This is the way it is. The reason, it's obvious as to why. I don't need to explain that I'm allergic to alcohol and I break out in handcuffs when I drink it. I don't need to go through that whole story. I've decided, it's a problem for me. You don't want to see me drunk. I'm not who you may like. But I assure you won't like me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, that's just it. Like, you don't want to see it. You may think you do. You may think I'm a funny guy that you'd love to see drunk, but no, I'm not that guy. I'm, like, you wouldn't want to see what happens to me or what I could get you into or anything else. And it's just a decision that I've made. And every time that I went through it, I was doing it that way. And it just makes it so much easier. Like, it really makes it simple. The easy part comes with some time, but that's true of any modality. There's no modality that doesn't get easier over time.
They're all cumulative.
Yeah. And just the staying away from it and letting the brain rewire itself to where it's not so directly plugged, like that. The base limbic desire to take action isn't so directly wired to the part of the brain that actually moves your hand. There's one last thing that Jack he was very happy about. So hold up your finger, Kristin, do this. Now, wiggle it. Okay. Now connect to the beast brain. No, don't touch it. I'm just saying, keep your finger up. but like, in your mind, summon the demon, summon the beast. Say, beast, you're like, I need you to come online for a second. The part of you that wants to go crazy. Huh?
I'm scared.
Don't be scared. Nothing to be scared of.
Okay.
So like that part of you that just loves to go party, right? Like, it's awake.
Okay.
I'm not saying get yourself in a state where you want to get drunk. I'm just saying, like, wake it up. Be like, dude, come out of your cage for a second. I want you to try something. Mm-hmm. All right. Now give it the order to move your front brain is refusing to move this finger. Okay. Challenge it to move it without your permission.
Can't.
It cannot move your finger without your permission. Now you, Kristin, the human being, move your finger. Now, beast, move the finger without Kristin's permission. And that is a demonstration of the fact that your motor movements, your behaviors that you do with your physical body are wired to a different part of the brain than throws out the idea. It is a quadriplegic oyster that sits in the back of your brain that throws out a feeling that is interpreted as words towards that feeling. No different. Like, hunger isn't a vocabulary, but you sure as hell know what it is, and you turn it into a vocabulary. Like, I'm feeling hungry. I think I'm going to go get a cheeseburger. Well, your brain took the hunger sensation that threw out from the back of your brain and turned it into words. But even your hunger couldn't go eat without your permission and your agreement to do so. So that's the last thing, is, can you wiggle your finger? So if somebody's out there is having a craving and you're like, like, I'm afraid that this craving is going to get the better of me, hold up your finger and challenge that craving to move your finger without your permission. Mm-hmm. And it just demonstrates an embodied practice that says this craving is powerless to actually take action. It needs me to agree. And if I refuse to agree, then we're just going to have a shitty night. Mm-hmm. Go do something else. And that's where, if cheeseburgers and sex are mm-hmm. they may be a good way to avoid a craving if it's really up and you're like, I'm going to McDonald's, baby. You saw me the other day. I was like, Kristin, I'm stressed out. I'm eating a double cheeseburger.
He was too.
Now that didn't lead to a week
wrong. They made it wrong.
Yes, they did. One slice of bacon on a double cheeseburger, double quarter pounder, one slice of bacon. That's an unacceptable quantity of bacon.
We're heading into a recession, Sam. You're going to have to become equipped to deal with these new portions.
If I'm paying $9 for a cheeseburger, it needs to have 3 slices of bacon on it.
I agree.
If you want to put one,
go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was ranting about bacon and we don't need to waste time.
Well, I was going to say another amazing example that you made of this in class last week. You said, if, and I'm paraphrasing here, but along the lines, if I'm at the mall and I see a beautiful woman, I am not powerless, just like I am not powerless against cravings for alcohol. We talk a lot when we're in recovery about cravings for drugs and alcohol, but we have a whole pyramid of needs, thanks to Maslow, that we also have to control ourselves. So to tell yourself all the time, I'm powerless, I'm powerless, I'm powerless, number one is bullshit. Number two is so self-defeating, because look in all of the other ways in your life that you have power over your choices. You did not go up to the woman in the mall and start playing bongos on her bottom, because you know you'll end up in jail. You know you'll, most importantly, you'll disrespect another human, and you don't want to disrespect another human. Therefore, you act in a way that is congruent with your values.
Well, let's
With
take it. Let's
alcohol.
take it. It's really easy for the addictive voice to say, well, of course you're not going to go commit sexual assault in the mall. So let's dial it back to, let's say I see the same super attractive human being, man or woman. I'm straight, so it's a woman in my case, but I don't care if you're a woman who likes women or a man who likes whatever. Don't care. I see a super attractive woman at the mall, and obviously I have zero hard time not playing bongos on her ass, because that's illegal and just highly immoral. Now, not nearly as immoral, but still outside of my code of conduct. I'm not going to sit there and leer at her in a gross way. I once heard this black minister say, he was giving a eulogy for another black minister, because he never stared at a woman too long.
Love that.
So I think there's about a 2-second window where it's like, soak it in, 1, 2, okay, back to your burger.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like there's a code of conduct. Now, you know, the desire to leer or to whatever is there. It's just that I have a code of conduct that says these are things that I don't engage in, so I'm not going to engage in them. So,
And the desire may be there. I was at a wedding a couple of months ago where they were passing out glasses of champagne for the toast, and the bride amazingly had alcohol-free champagne as well. And so I would be lying if I didn't have the thought, what if they accidentally put real champagne in my glass, even after I asked for the alcohol-free one? Like bad girl rebel teenager Kristin is not dead. She still had the sneaky ass thought of, no one will ever know. And because that thought began with you, not I knew it was not my thought. It was not my,
right.
And I knew, as I watched him pour the alcohol-free one and said thank you and enjoyed my fake champagne, that I won the battle again, because I'm not powerless. And another thing I want to add, I've recently graduated from a program that's been almost 2 years long that all has to do with subconscious and neural pathways and wiring. I won't go into all of that, but one of the most important things I learned was the words that follow I am will follow you through your life.
Mm-hmm.
Be extremely careful what you let follow the words I am. And if it is powerless, I want you to fact check yourself. because you're not playing bongos on women's asses at the mall, because you are not only eating pizza for 3 meals a day. You are fighting these urges on a 10 times a day basis. I mean, if we have more than 70,000 thoughts a day,
Right.
you're fighting against your own choices many times a day. So don't let the word powerless follow the words I am, ever. No matter who tells you to, just don't do it. That's my 2 cents.
Well, the beast loves the idea of being powerless. It
Absolutely.
loves it because it opens the door to delicious, delicious relapses.
Yeah. I was powerless. I had no choice.
Yeah, and so it loves any of the ideas thrown out by any of the modalities. It loves the ideas that, of you're not in control. You don't get to decide. If you don't do this, then you won't be delivered from your situation. It loves those ideas because, like, hey, you didn't use your CBT exercise correctly. So yeah, the only way to deal with that is to get drunk. Obviously, like it's just back there just looking for any excuse whatsoever. It doesn't matter what the excuse is, and it doesn't give a shit about any of your goals and aspirations or your family or any of the values you have as a human. It doesn't care any more than you would care about the well-being of your kids if you were locked in a room that didn't have air. You wouldn't care. You wouldn't necessarily sacrifice their life for your own in that situation, but you wouldn't be thinking about what you could do for them next weekend. You'd be like, I need air right now. Well,
Yes.
Anybody who's ever been in the grip of an addiction knows that it's not that far from being locked in a room without air, when it's just like you
So
feel like you have to have that in order to get through the next hour. You have to have it in you, or you're just not gonna. You're gonna explode. You're gonna like you're gonna crawl out of your own skin. Everybody knows that feeling. That feeling goes away fast, especially once you've just decided that this is not the way it's going to be. You're not going to be dealing with that forever. So, but it doesn't care any more than it cares about anything else. Like if you were hungry, you're not going to be polite. Like people are 9 meals away from raiding grocery stores, and most people aren't thieves, but take away 9 meals, they'll take whatever food they can find, and then like there's no social order that prevents them. Like, would you steal bread to feed your hungry kid? We all say yes, of course I would.
absolutely.
And so one last thing, I know we're kind of up against and over the time of this the tab, but you and I get to yap it at each other, and it gets fun. So people can either tune out or deal with it. But we were talking about some of the quantum leap, manifestation type stuff. And I think that there's a real congruency here between, if you're looking at the manifestation stuff, none of the affirmational practices, and David Bear was talking about this, like none of the practices that you can do make really any difference at all if you haven't shifted yourself, like your internal definition of who you are. That's what resonates and activates, like, you being a different person that attracts different experiences. You can be woo woo or you cannot be. If people are, let's be honest, if they're listening to you, they're probably woo woo. So I'll just keep it out in woo woo land. But none of the practices, all of those practices can support the new definition of yourself, but none of them really matter if that new definition isn't something that you believe. Well, what I'm talking about with AVRT is just that. Like, it's okay. The past doesn't matter. Nothing that I ever said, none of the 1,000 ways I've screwed things up in my life, including my multiple attempts to stay sober and change my mind because I wanted to. None of that matters. The past is irrelevant compared to, like, today and the decision I could make. And it's an instant quantum jump. I am no longer a person that engages in that bullshit. I'm not the kind of, I'm a person in the world that just doesn't do that. I am not the kind of person that does the things I used to do. I'm not the kind of person I used to be. And there's no rule in the universe that says that you have to go through some long process to just decide that you're someone else. Now, the world and life and reality will test your decision, obviously, but you can decide in a day that this is who I am now.
You can decide in 1 second.
And you can start living as if it were true. And I know very specifically one particular recovery modality where you are recommended to act as if you are already recovered. And there's tremendous wisdom in that, regardless of other parts that people may disagree with. There's tremendous wisdom in fake it till you make it, act as if. And I'm not, like people say, fake it till you make it, that's inauthentic. No, it's not. Start behaving as if you are the person that you've decided you're going to be. Whether it's deciding to be a light worker out into the world, like I have decided, like I wake up, I sent you a song this morning that you can, it's like, okay, this is who I've decided I'm going to be, and I'm going to remind myself of this decision as often as possible. I'm going to be this white blood cell out in the world. I'm, like, this is who I am, and I get to decide, and no one gets to tell me otherwise.
And my actions follow my decision.
Yeah, that's act as if. My behavior will be as if I am that person, so that, and any form of doubt that says you are the same asshole you've always been is just, that's a thought that's coming from, maybe not the addictive brain in this case, but it's coming from the devil or what. It ain't me. It ain't me and the one that's decided I'm going to be this person. It's some form of demonic doubt. Like you can't change. You're never going to change. You're always going to be the same guy that died.
Again, no, that is starting with the word you.
Yeah, well, I believe that there's a spiritual component to this, but I don't include that spiritual component with AVRT because it's very most definitely not part of AVRT. But I do believe that the as above, so below kind of thing. Like I do believe that on a spiritual basis, it's the same thing. Like I've decided I'm going to be this, and there's going to be, call it the devil, call it dark energy, call it demons, call it whatever, Shiva with their 8 middle fingers, like whatever is going to want you to doubt that and to say thank you for sharing, or thank you for caring, and fuck you for sharing. That's not a thought that I'm open to having. So, it's got to happen. But it's not a thought I'm open to having, and my behavior, to the best of my ability, it will be to act as if this is the case. I will behave in alignment with the decision that I've made, and the more you behave in alignment with the decision that you've made, the easier it becomes to behave that way, and the more that decision gets solidified and carved in stone. Like, this is who I am, and whether it's your own weird thoughts that creep in or other people, crabs in a barrel, like God forbid this person break free from the prison that I've lived in my whole life. Nothing has the ability to say this isn't true, or that this decision is not the right decision. This is who I've decided I'm going to be, and this is how it's going to be. So I believe that quantum shift is relevant. Like in addiction recovery, you can just say, no, I'm just not that person anymore. Don't say I am an addict. Like you said, don't let that say I was addicted to drugs. That's a true statement. I was addicted to alcohol and pot. I was. Past tense, was addicted. I'm no longer addicted. I can choose to go use them and re-addict myself quite easily. Mm-hmm. It takes about 2 hours for me to get re-addicted to that shit.
Yep. And by telling yourself, I'm an alcoholic, I'm an addict, it's coaching, literally, your brain to look for instances and behaviors that have to do with alcoholic behavior. So you are defeating you are feeding the beast. Every time you look at a person or yourself and say, I'm an alcoholic, you're inviting alcoholic behavior, thoughts, consumption to your brain. And there will be people that say, but that's worked for me for 30 years. I've been sober. And to that, I say, I'm stoked that that works for you. This isn't to you, it's working
Yeah.
for you. This conversation is for, I'm on the fence, or I've tried it that way, me, and it didn't work for me because it made me want to be an alcoholic every day. Until I freed myself from the beast, from the voice, from the notion of I'm an alcoholic, that's when my true sobriety began. That's when my true journey began.
Well, and there's a lot of people out there who don't even meet the colloquial definition of alcoholic who are seeking help with addiction care.
Yes.
You know, like, so all of those terms and labels don't mean, I don't care if somebody drinks one glass of wine a night. If they say this is a problem for the, you know, the reasons we stated, if it fucks with my medication or it changes my sleep patterns with just this amount, and I'm done because I've chosen a different life, it's all the same. Yeah. And that person is going to struggle too. If they've habitualized that one glass of wine, they might not get the DTs from it, but they're still gonna have to get it in their head that there's a part of them that wants that glass of wine, and it doesn't have to be anything that meets any criteria of alcohol use disorder or anything else. I mean, I'm not addicted to Cheetos in any way, shape, or form, but damn if I don't see a bag and want them up in me.
Sam, this has been so amazing, so insightful, and I really hope that whether or not you are curious about what it is like to be in recovery or which way should I go, our goal today was to shed light on there are many ways. There are many ways and many choices, and this is one that speaks to Sam and I. It works for us, and we've described why. And I'm excited to say this is a conversation that we're going to continue because there's so much more that I want to talk about this subject.
It's the tip of the iceberg. I would say, yes, there are 1,000 different ways to support your ongoing growth as a person in abstinence. There's only one way to recover from addiction, and that's to stop doing it. That's it. There's only one way. None of it works. You know, like, don't do it is the first decision that has to get made, and AVRT just simplifies that decision as well as possible. That's why I like it, because I like things to be simple. But yeah, like I agree that there are many different ways, and if it's working, it's working. You know, like whatever supports somebody in their ongoing living their life to the living their best life, as they say on the internet. You know, knock yourself out. I don't care. I don't care what anybody does. I don't care if you're, you know, in a church basement praying to Shiva. I don't care. Like, it makes me no difference. If you're out there saying nothing I've tried has worked, my question would be, have you ever decided to knock it the fuck off?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't know I could do that. Yeah, that's what you're going to have to do. I don't care what you choose as your modality. You're going to have to knock it the fuck off or nothing's going to work.
Yeah, you have to make a decision that is not for me, whether it's alcohol, whether it's over consuming porn, whether it is over consuming social media. From the moment you have awareness, it starts with awareness and acknowledgement. In that moment, you have a choice to make. I'm aware this is a problem. I acknowledge this is a problem. That is no longer for me. And then to quote James Clear, every action after that you take is a vote, is evidence of the person you wish to become. So when you say that's not for me, you've really cut out a lot of your problematic decision making. Like you've really simplified things just by saying that's not for me. And then the choices that you make after that have clarity, have
I've
connection.
Jack always. I agree with what you just said. I use the term "knock it off" because Jack Trimpey used that, and I love it because everybody has been told if you're a kid being a douchebag, knock it off.
Yeah.
Like there's power in that specific phrase because it's like, yeah, you know, you should knock it off. Like and like, yeah, if you're doing something that's harming yourself and others, knock it off. Like no different than a kid who won't shut up in sixth grade. Like, you know, knock it off right now. Just knock it off. Like we all, and everybody who's ever been in addiction knows that feeling of I should knock this off. Like I should just stop. Just and then a thousand different thoughts come in, all of them addictive voice as to why you can't just knock it off.
But you
And
can.
with a little, yeah, it takes deciding to knock it off and believing that you have the power to do it, and then everything else falls into place over time.
That's right.
And that's that. It's been a pleasure talking to you. We went 18 minutes over your stated goal, which
I
I
know,
knew
I
you.
gotta hurry.
I took it as a challenge, and you said we're stopping at 11. I was like, no,
I've
we're
learned my
not.
lesson.
You, you
Yeah,
were powerless. You were powerless to stop at 11.
I loved every minute of it, Sam. I appreciate having this conversation with you.
I look forward to the next one. I'm always happy to yap about
Yeah.
things.
I love it. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this conversation. I would love to hear your thoughts and how this landed on you, especially if you learned something new. Always open for ideas and suggestions. And overall, just extremely grateful for you spending your morning, your time with us, and extremely grateful to you, Sam. I love doing this work with you. Thank you.
I love doing the work with you too. And since you're remiss to advertise yourself as effectively as you should, I will tell everybody listening, Coach Kristin is good at coaching, and you should sign up for a free session with her. If you are not in need of coaching but know someone who is, refer them to her.
Very, very kind. I
And
appreciate
if you need if you need a redneck in Indiana to tell you to knock it the fuck off, she'll put us on a conference call. I'm always happy to say shit.
I appreciate you, Sam, so much.
Love you, Kristin.
Love you too. Thank you. Love all of you. Thank you. Bye for now.